Today, Republican Senator Tim Scott officially announced his bid for president, while also getting an endorsement from the Senate's #2 Republican. Scott joins a growing field of declared candidates, and that field is expected to keep growing. This week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is also expected to officially jump in the race. Speaking before a crowd in his home state of South Carolina, Scott, the only black Republican senator, highlighted his background as an example of America's opportunity and as a rebuke of President Biden and Democrats.
I'm the candidate the far left fears the most. When I cut your taxes, they called me a prop. When I refunded the police, they called me a token. When I pushed back on President Biden, they even called me the N-word. I disrupt their narrative. I threaten their control. The truth of my life disrupts their lives.
After his announcement, Scott spoke to NBC's Tom Llamas in a wide-ranging exclusive interview about his pitch to primary voters and what, if anything, makes him a better choice for Republican voters than Trump.
What will you offer voters that former President Trump will not?
Well, the question is, I'm running for president, period. I plan to win. So the question is, what do the voters want in their president? They want someone who can persuade on the issues that matter the most to them.
You're saying you're a better deal maker than President Trump, former president?
What I'm saying is that I look forward to persuading the American people, right and left, within my base and on the far side, to making sure that we move this country forward using common sense, finding common ground.
Would you ever try to overturn an election you lost?
No.
What do you think about President Trump's behavior after the 2020 election into January 6th?
Yes. We can do two things here. We can have a conversation about President Trump, or we can have a conversation about my vision for the future. I'm going to stay on my vision for the future for a couple of reasons.
But it was a historical moment. I think voters deserve to know.
Actually, I was actually in there, so I know exactly how historic it was. But what I will say is simply this, that the future that America is focusing on is what I'm going to provide. I'm going to continue to talk about those conservative principles that move this country forward.
Joining me now with more of his interview with Senator Scott is senior national correspondent and host of Top Story, Tom Llamas. Now, Tom, you were asking all the right questions. Heading into this announcement, Senator Scott has been polling low. So how is he making the argument that he's the one to beat Trump, who, of course, remains the front runner? I know that he sort of didn't want to talk about Trump, but clearly that is a big topic here for right reasons.
Yeah, Yamiche, I think there's a couple headlines being made out of this interview, and it literally just wrapped minutes ago. What I will say is this: Senator Tim Scott is drawing a difference with former President Trump by saying that he thinks he can be more persuadable. Essentially, he can persuade voters more, not only within this party, but also reaching across the aisle to the other party as well. So maybe a more formidable candidate in the general election than former President Trump. He also said, when I asked him about Governor DeSantis, he says that his conservatism is more rooted, his meaning Senator Tim Scott, that he was essentially saying to a degree, and we'll have the transcripts and the bites coming out a little later, but that essentially that Senator Tim Scott was a true conservative. On the issue of Ukraine, he also drew a very stark difference, essentially saying that Governor DeSantis was wrong when he called it a territorial dispute, and also that former President Trump was wrong when he signaled that he didn't care who won, whether it be Ukraine or Russia, just that the war needed to stop. So he drew some clear lines in his race for president, and this is the most he's gone, I would argue, since he's announced his candidacy for president, since he's been out there on the campaign trail, clearly making a pitch to voters that, one, he's more persuadable, and two, he's more conservative than former Governor DeSantis. Two big key issues that will affect voters all across the GOP primary states as they start to vote. We also talked about his journey with religion and the moment that he found God. And he told us about, feeling Jesus' presence when that happened, how his life was transformed after a car accident, how he was a football player growing up, and that car accident sort of changed his future. But with the help of God and with others, his life truly changed, and it put him on the path that he is now. And we even talked about also some interesting personal matters, including his personal life. If he were to win this nomination, if he were to win the general election, he'd be the first president in our history since Grover Cleveland and James Buchanan who would go to the White House as a bachelor. And we talked a little bit about that, and we'll of course, have those sound bites as we put together our stories in the coming hours and days on Senator Tim Scott.
Well, history-making bachelor is one that was not on my bingo card, but it is true. I also want to ask you about his policy positions. You say that he's talking about being a true conservative. What else did he say about policy issues?
You know, he said he is a 100% pro-life candidate when it comes to abortion. We tried to nail him down when it came to issues like a 6-week ban, a 12-week ban. Essentially what he said is that he didn't want to deal in hypotheticals, right? But he would sign the most pro-life anti-abortion measures ever to hit this country is what he was saying. But the problem, he said, was that first has to be pushed through Congress, and that hasn't happened yet. He didn't want to say whether the 6 weeks was too harsh, as President Trump has signaled when we talk about Florida and the law that Governor DeSantis just signed. And he didn't really want to deal with the 12 weeks as well. He has before signaled that he's okay with timelines like that, with markers like that. But at least in this interview, he wanted to talk more about the legislation that would come to his desk and how he would sign it and how he would make that into law. We did talk about some other social issues, including transgender athletes, and he was against transgender athletes competing in the sports that those people transition into. So essentially, if a boy transitions to a girl, he says those athletes should not compete in the girls' athletics. We talked about that as well, along with other issues, including China. I pressed him on Taiwan. I said, if China were to invade Taiwan, would the U.S. military defend Taiwan against China? After a little back and forth, he essentially said that the U.S., he believed, would stand shoulder to shoulder with Taiwan, which is a major move, but of course with U.S. policy as well.
And I'm told we have a little bit of the sound that where you're talking to Senator Scott about abortion. So maybe we could play that for folks if we have it.
Yeah. Where do you stand on abortion?
Well, I believe that life has intrinsic value because it comes from God. I have a 100% pro-life voting record. I'm a 100% pro-life conservative. As President of the United States, I would sign the most conservative legislation, pro-life legislation that can get to my desk. Here's the issue, though. Nothing can get to my desk unless we first win the hearts and minds of the American people.
Tom?
And Senator Scott from here in Charleston, South Carolina, he heads to Iowa and New Hampshire. He's also going to be up in the air with ads as well. He's raised a lot of money, and he's going to be spending it. Yamish?
Well, congratulations on a big interview on a big day. So thanks so much for joining us. And you can catch more of Tom's exclusive interview with Senator Tim Scott tonight on Nightly News and again on Top Story right here on NBC News Now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.